I'm Ana Ramos, and I'm so glad you're here. There are a lot of stories being told about the younger generation right now, that they're entitled, that they lack work ethic, that they want results without responsibility. And while stereotypes are easy to repeat, they're rarely true. Today's guest challenges that narrative in a very quiet, very powerful way. Kaya Pierre-Dawkins is a recent graduate who didn't come to Amida through a traditional application or a formal interview. She came through presence, through intention, through the kind of confidence that doesn't announce itself, but draws people in. From the very first conversation, Kaya carried herself with a calm self-assurance that was magnetic. Not loud, not performative, just grounded. Throughout her internship, she showed up with professionalism, curiosity, and grace, proving that this generation isn't lacking direction. They're redefining it. This conversation is an invitation to look again at what confidence can sound like, what intention can feel like, and how the next generation is entering the workforce with a depth we don't always pause to see. I'm so excited to share her perspective with you today. So, take a breath, settle in, let's begin. Kaya, welcome so much on this podcast. It's so good to see you. How are you?
I'm great. So good to see you.
Phenomenal. And by the way, Milu's with me. She's sleeping here, so she's good. And what part of the world are you in today? Because Miss Travel Lady.
I am in Washington, D.C., nation's capital.
Oh, that's so amazing. Well, it's good to have you. I wanted to welcome you. And, this podcast is it's about talking about today's generation, right? Like, we hear so many different things about today's generation. And I think it's just more like a lack of understanding. And I want us to talk in this podcast about, one of the things that I learned in being able to work with you during your internship with us is that you're extremely intentional in the things that you do. And, I think we can share a funny story how we met, which we can do a little bit later. But I want you to kind of take us a little bit back. And when I describe Kaya, right, and when you think of your attributes today, if you take us back a little bit, what made you trust yourself? Like, what made you to say, because to me, you're so intentional, so forward in the things that you do, you're very assured of yourself. What brought to you, what made you trust yourself?
Yeah, I think yeah, the story of how we met is probably a great example of that. I think going back into myself, I've always been someone that's had a very strong sense of self. And I don't know where that came from. I have some ideas, but I've always been very confident, even if I'm not necessarily always embraced for who I am. I've always had a very strong sense of self. And one of those things is that I really long for human connection. I'm very social, I'm extroverted. Um, and that kind of relates into how we met because we met at brunch and I was on my spring break. So I was with one of my best friends, my grandma, and we were just having brunch. And I remember your puppy at the time, Milu, you were there celebrating Milu's birthday. And we were seated next to each other and we just kind of got into conversation. And that initial connection was from having dogs. Your dog's name is Milu, mine was Milo, and talking about our puppies. And organically, we started talking about our lives. And I was studying finance in college at the time, and hearing that one, you were in the industry, but also hearing that your perspective on finance and wealth, it was so eye-opening and inspiring to me that I wasn't going to make this brunch about having a work talk, but I really felt the sense that I wanted to connect, and I think having that trust was because I wasn't looking for a certain goal. I wasn't going into that conversation thinking A leads to B and this is what I'm going to get. I was really interested in a genuine conversation. And it wasn't about a job or what you could do for me. It's just what I could learn.
And it's interesting that you said that you don't remember when. So we're going to explore a little bit because I have a feeling that you can actually pinpoint the moments, the times that actually began to build that confidence in you. And I was so impressed with you guys, like it was such a group. It was the four of you, it was you, your best friend, your aunt and your grandma, I believe, or a friend and your grandma. And what beautiful, I said, wow, what beautiful ladies, they're sitting next to me. And of course, Milu, the natural connector to us all, and all of my relationships as of late, when she came into my life, she has been my connector. You carry this beautiful, silent presence and elegance at the same time. And when I look at your grandmother, for example, to me, she embodies a strong woman, yet somebody who's elegant and defined. So let us explore a little bit, because you said you can remember, or you've always felt, you always been assured of yourself. Let's think a little bit about when you were growing up. What influence did your mother have, your parents have, your grandparents? Can you think of moments that they helped you build that confidence? Because I truly believe that it's nurture and nature at the same time. So think a little bit back, and can you think of moments of things that they did that help you to solidify the confidence in you? And also perhaps even moments of things that they did that you now looking back says, this didn't serve me, but I pivoted this way.
Yeah. No, that's so true. It does come from childhood. I think so my background, I'm an only child. Oh, I grew up as an only child and mostly from a single mom. And my mom is an immigrant from Haiti. So I don't know if anyone knows anything about Haitian culture. There's a big emphasis on education, on discipline. And I think there's always, I mean, it's a very common story, but there's always a little bit of pressure. You feel a need to succeed and kind of give back to communities when you know that your parents have sacrificed a lot for you. So growing up as an only child and growing up with my mom, I think I became one, independent in certain senses, and I was also a gymnast growing up, so that I acquired a lot of discipline from that. But I also think as an only child, you learn to create your own community, and the only way to do that is by socializing. You have to go out of your way to make friends. You have to go out of your way to make family. My immediate family was very small. So I've always strived for human connection and community, and the only way to do that was to kind of go out of my way and form those connections outside of my inner circle. And I think also in thinking about some things that necessarily didn't serve me, um, my father was a presence in my life, and we all have our own battles, and he kind of struggled with mental health and some other things that he had to struggle with. And I think that also made me grow up a little earlier, but also really strengthened my sense of empathy at a young age, because I with a relationship so close, and you understand that things are nuanced, and that people, although they may want to show up for you, that doesn't necessarily always actionalize. And there are things that people struggle with, and you have to kind of understand those things. And I started to understand them at a very young age.
Thank you for sharing that personal story, because I know sometimes we tend to keep our past quiet, right? But I think it has truly shaped us into who we are as humans. And I love the fact that you do have empathy towards that, because I think, there's a couple things that I've learned along my journey, and I'm just a little bit slightly older than you. And one of them is first to take breath and say, this too shall pass, right? But the second aspect of the things that I've learned is that this is their journey and it's not necessarily my journey. But I'm going to allow them to live their journey. I'm going to have the compassion enough to allow them to live their journey. So it sounds like you've learned that lesson early on in life. So now you're about to enter the professional workforce, and congratulations. It was a sad moment at Amida when Kaya said, "Okay, I guess my internship is done, but I'm glad that you're going to be coming back in a different capacity that's going to continue to support your growth." But I believe that you also did another internship before. Talk to us a little bit about your early experience in corporate America through your internships, and what lessons did you learn? What was impactful for you? What were aha moments? and and share how that impacted you and the way you see how you're going to move forward in corporate America today.
I think this is such a relevant topic for my generation. And I think it all kind of ties back into personal brand. And I think that's kind of a buzzword in our generation, but it is very important. And it relates back into having a strong sense of self. And I always like to think, how do I want to be perceived and how do I want to show up in certain spaces? So I think for internships, there are two things that I always like to say. Like you you want to show up, you want to give your best effort, but you can always lean into the fact that you are an intern. So um like there's I feel like there's this sense, and I get that from people around me, that everyone wants to seem as if they know everything and they're so knowledgeable. And the truth of the matter is that when you're interning, you're 19, 20, 21, and you have no real experience. So no one's looking for you to come in and be some senior manager and have all this experience. They know that you don't know. So I think there's a lot of power in leaning into being an intern and saying, I have a skill set, but this is something that I don't actually know yet. And I think intuitively people think, oh my God, everyone's going to think you're incompetent. But actually, it's always been received very positively when I come and say, hey, I actually don't know how to do this. Can you help me with this? I've started this and I don't know if I'm going down the right path. Is this the way I should go? And there's a fine line between that and helplessness. You shouldn't go in and just say, oh my God, I don't know anything. I can't do anything. But it's okay to say, I have the skills in me, but I would like to learn this, or I could use some help in this area.
I love that you say that, Kaya, because even as older people than you and your generation, I think we still have so much more to learn. And I think that the day we stop learning is the day we start dying, right? Honestly. So please don't stop learning if you want to have longevity in your life, don't stop. But what would you say in your generation, the pressure to have it all figured out, like, I know it all. Where do you think that pressure comes from? Is it self-inflicted? Is it inflicted by social media? Where does that self-pressure come from? Family? I mean, where would you say in your generation that pressure comes from?
I think there's a lot of factors. I know for myself, it could be family or expectations, but I do think generally for a lot of young people, it is social media. I mean, we are addicted to our phones, and I'm not excluding myself and saying I'm above this. I wake up in the morning and I go and I scroll on TikTok, and I think there's such an oversaturation of content. And a lot of it is from young people that seem to have it all figured out. You're looking at 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds that have money and they seem to look perfect on the outside, and then they're somehow rich and they're traveling every weekend, and they're getting engaged and they're doing all these things, and you're looking at your own life. But I think it's important to even look inward. If I think about myself, I'm not posting my failures on social media or the days where I don't look great. If you go on my Instagram right now, it's, oh, I was traveling here and there and I'm having all these wonderful experiences, even professionally. If you go on LinkedIn, I'm posting job offers. I'm not posting, jobs that I got rejected from. So I think if you take a step back and think about it from your own perspective, understand that there's an illusion, and it's not necessarily reflective of the broader space of people, and that most people are in the same boat. We don't have it figured out, and it's okay to not have it figured out.
How do you survive in that world? And I'm not going to say survive, because to me survival, it's almost, I don't want to say it's negative, but to me it is kind of negative. I always like to use the word thrive. So regardless of what situation that we're in, how do we find that light so that we can thrive? So how do you survive that world, right? The pressures of that world.
There are two things for me. I think community is huge. I am someone that really believes that who you surround yourself with is one of the most important things you can do. One, with friendships, I am constantly around people that I am inspired by. And when it comes to that, I can understand that my best friend is someone that I'm so inspired by. I think she's intelligent. I think she's strong. I think she can rule the world. And she has setbacks too. She has insecurities too. So when you look at other people, sometimes we're so much easier on other people than we are on ourselves. So when you look at people that you admire and you see that they're all also human, I think it's easier to kind of give yourself that same compassion that you give to other people. And I also think I'm someone that I like to ground myself in feelings rather than what other people mark as success or tangible success. So really in everyday life, I just think of, am I proud of myself? Am I proud of the way that I showed up at work? Am I proud of the way that I showed up in my friendships? Am I proud of the way that I showed up as a daughter? Am I leading with empathy? Am I being kind? Am I being considerate? Um, and if I've done that today, then I can sleep at night. I feel good, even if that doesn't mean I got this six-figure job or I received all this praise. If I feel comfortable in my character, um, I feel good.
Walk us through a day in your life, right? Because we all go through great moments and not so great moments. Walk us through a day in your life. And then I kind of want to hear a little bit more about when you go through moments like that, even your friend who has it all figured out, right? So we all have moments of self-doubt and, where we don't feel pretty enough or we're not attaining this because we are a little bit about biohack. What is the biohack that you use to shift back to presence, to how I'm feeling, right? That was your key, right? It's like, how do I feel? You do a self check of how does this make me feel? How do I feel? So walk us through a day in your life. And then when moments are not so great and so amazing, what biohack do you use to kind of shift you back into that?
Yeah, I think that's so important. I'll do a day in my life at Amida because I love my days and I love my days at Amida.
Well, I have to tell you, Kaya, before you say whatever you say, you impress the hell out of me. And I don't say that kindly. I mean, you were magnetism. You were not like any other intern because, and I don't think I treated you like any other intern, right? I think it was like, nope, let's go. Here we go. Like to me, you were a regular person with thoughts, ideas, intelligence, experience, knowledge. And I'm like, here's a situation. How do we tackle it? So you really impressed me tremendously. So walk us through a day.
Thank you. Yeah, so a typical day in my life at Amida is I would wake up, I would get ready for the day. I would prepare. Usually I would have meetings with Anna and another colleague, Deirdre, and I would kind of present what I've been working on. And I think this was really important for my growth professionally because I was given complete freedom in terms of I don't think you see that as an intern often. I was the one leading these meetings and I got so in practice with that. So I would lead the meeting, kind of say what we're going to go over, and then Anna would be like, "Great. But I'm having this new idea and I want to see this." And I'll go, "Great, let me go back to the drawing board and try and piece these together." But I think it was so great for my critical thinking skills, and also the nerd in me kind of saw it as a puzzle. So, okay, how can I fit these puzzle pieces together? But what I really enjoyed at Amida, and I think what helped me thrive was the flexibility. So it was very project based. So as long as I got my work done within that week or within the month, no one was monitoring what hour I clocked in and what hour I clocked out. So let's say I had kind of a mental block or I wasn't in the flow, sometimes that I could take time out if that meant going for a walk or going for a workout at 3 p.m., which is not something that you can necessarily do in a normal job, but kind of releasing dopamine in that way. But I also, you can't always do that. This was just something that I was able to do at Amida. So there are some other kind of smaller biohacks that I could use, whether while I was in school or some of my other internships. I think this is unique, but I actually went to a Quaker school for middle school and high school. And Quakers are very ground, not Quaker, but Quakers are very grounded in moments of silence. And we actually opened up our day every day with 5 minutes of silence. And although I didn't appreciate it at the time, I think it's become a useful skill because you wake up and you're on social media and you just hear so much. So to sit with yourself and your thoughts, although it can be uncomfortable, it can also be a very grounding experience.
I love that. I think that's beautiful. And by the way, whenever I said but, all I was doing was creating thought, creating a different way in, and I thank you for playing along, right? Because I learned a lot from you, and I believe that you learned a lot from us. So if you were to take now your internship experience, right, and you worked at two different companies, you're now going to enter the professional world in mergers and acquisitions. And one of the first things I said to you, because I remember you telling me, I want to stay. And I'm like, go. That's like me, the mother, like the mother bird, like kicking the little bird out of the nest. It's like, no, go learn mergers and acquisitions. And I say, but take the lessons with you. And I said, keep your mouth shut when you need to, observe, listen, grow. And then you can make decisions for yourself. But what would you say, Kaya, are some of the biggest lessons through your internship that you want to make sure that you carry forward with you as you enter now the corporate world, which is, it's challenging, but you're entering even a corporate world where it is also very male dominated, right? Very doing energy. And you get judged at a different level as well. Not only because you're a minority and you're a female and you're young. I mean, you got a lot of, in today's perspective, you have a lot of, I don't want to say daggers, but sort of like potential daggers coming your way. How do you manage that stress, and what lessons did you learn in your internships that you want to carry that forward with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I never shy away from my identity, or I think you can't leave your identity at the door. You can't leave your race, your gender, your socioeconomic background, who you are, that you carry that into every room. Um, and that has been a source of anxiety for me at times where in college, I went to a primarily white institution, and especially in finance classes, there weren't a lot of people that looked like me. And there weren't a lot of women in the room. And I felt that going into my internships and knowing that that's potentially the spaces that I'm going to be in going into my full-time role. Um, but I also have always felt very confident in who I am, being a Haitian American, being a woman, being myself. And I think the best thing you can do is embrace that identity. So, although as a new entry, there is power in, as you said, politely being quiet. You're there to be a sponge, you're there to learn. You're not a senior, you don't have authority, you're not making any decisions. Um, but I think you talk about quiet confidence. That doesn't mean that I'm not staying true to who I am in those places. And I think there's power. There's power in I always think there's power in from my ancestors and being Haitian, and there's power in femininity. And I think that comes in communication. I think communication has been one of my greatest strengths, and people have joked that I'm able to be direct and kind of give some hard truths in a very soft package. um, and I think that can be a testament to my identity as well. And that all circles back into empathy, and all these traits go into the skill set that I've developed as a professional and as a person. So I want to make sure that yes, I'm learning, and yes, I'm kind of at the bottom of the totem pole, but I don't internalize that to mean that I'm inferior, because there's so much strength in my presence and being in those rooms and making room for other people as well.
I think you said that so beautifully, Kaya. And here, I'm going to share a little biohack in corporate America that nobody does today and what help you to continue to stand out there. One of the things that you're going to encounter in corporate America is that they want the 1 year goal, the 5 year goal, the 10 year goal, right? And a lot of times it's centered around numbers, right? And when you can insert at the right time the question, tell me what the vision is, right? So now you're going to shift someone from being very numbers oriented to being more on the softer side. And at first they may look at you extremely weird. But it's like, no, what is it that you're trying to tell? Like, walk me through the vision of what it is and what you want people to feel, or whatever the situation is. I think that that's such a big impact that you were literally here. You can be this little person in this room full of egos and everything, and just asking that question alone, you're going to make people stop and think. So hopefully that little biohack can help you along the way.
And I think that's such a testament to the process that we had at Amida. And I learned so much from that because I feel like if you talk about funneling down, I think I would get into meetings and you would just tell me your vision. This is what I think it should feel like. This is what I think it should look like. This is how our client should feel, and this is how um, people should receive our media. And then my job was to figure out, step backwards, okay, what granular like technical things can we put in place to get our overall vision. So it wasn't driven by monetary goals, but driven by impact, which I think is so important.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure leading you. But as I think a little bit more about the future, right? And you mentioned the word anxiety a lot because it is a word that it's happening a lot out there today. Perhaps sometimes being used more than it should, but I think there's a lot of truthness to it that it hasn't been spoken in the past and now it's being spoken more. And like I said, you mentioned it several times. So when you go through moments of anxiety for yourself, what creates anxiety for you? What do you do to come back to center, to come back to self, to come back to Kaya?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a very recent thought in my brain. And I mean, to give a little bit more background, I was someone who, and this is probably a cultural thing, as someone who's very guarded, and I dealt with things internally for a long time. And I was always someone that didn't like to talk about when I needed help or when I was suffering. And when I got into college, and kind of had that first sense of adulthood, I I noticed in myself that there was a big disconnect between um my emotions. I wasn't attuned to my emotions and how I felt. So things would happen and I couldn't articulate them, or I couldn't get in touch with my emotions. And I made the choice to start therapy. Um and it was very transformative. And I think when you work on your mental health, it's very different than physical health, where you start lifting weights and you gradually see yourself slim down or tone up. Working on my mental health has really been a an internal journey, but this year it kind of clicked for me that things started happening, and I started processing and articulating and communicating within myself, hey, I think, take a step back. I think this is what you're feeling. And it's been so beautiful because you do that work internally. You never know when it shows up, and when it clicks, it clicks. And that's not to say that I don't face anxiety now. I always face anxiety, but I think it's so important to work on yourself. And that's why I like to openly speak about therapy, because I used to get bothered by things and have no idea what is bothering me. And now I can think, okay, you maybe reacted because of this. Let's take a second and let's think about the logical or more rational conclusion. So I know therapy is a privilege and not everyone has access to it, but I think there's such a connection between talking to yourself and getting in touch with your emotions.
Wow, that's something that I didn't even know. And, it's interesting because you said this happened this year. Can you attribute it to a particular moment or time that created that aha moment, that awareness that allow you to be able to start pivoting and shifting?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of things that I think graduating college is such a transitionary time, and there's so much uncertainty. You're kind of just thrown into the real world. And I've felt a calmness even throughout all of those uncertainties, that I trust in myself, and I trust in my decision making, and I trust in my discernment. Um, and not to get super personal, but I I broke up with someone at the beginning of I broke up a romantic relationship at the beginning of 2025. And I I was proud of myself for understanding that this isn't something that's serving me. And that doesn't mean someone's a terrible person, but I can make the decision for my life that this isn't serving me, and I can grow independently. And I think I was very proud on how I handled that situation, and how I was able to just kind of make decisions that I was proud of throughout the year.
I think that's so beautiful, and what a beautiful way to segment towards the end of our conversation, Kaya. I've admired you, and I'm looking forward to welcoming you back in whatever capacity you can. The doors are always open to you, and I love how graduation was for you this time around, right? Like when a lot of people today graduating, there's a lot of anxiety out there, or there's a lot of what if, what's going to happen, what's my next step, right? So if you have somebody who's graduating, and not just at your level, but people are nowadays going back to school in their 40s, in their 50s, when they retire, and that moment of my life, or the view that my life is going to shift, right? This is going to be different. What advice can you give them, right? In order to create that security, that assurance, that calmness that you experienced.
This is so pertinent right now because I have friends, and especially I empathize with people that just graduated when I did, because it's been a very tough job market, and I feel so privileged and lucky to have the opportunity to have security in that regards. But I know so many young people that are so skilled and so talented and so intelligent and did all the right things that you're supposed to do, and didn't find a job. And I think you might look at people with jobs and think that they all have it figured out, but it's just such a tough time personally, professionally. Um, and I think what's helped me, and I think people say this all the time, but it is so true, that comparison is the thief of joy, and your journey is really your journey. So you don't have to have it figured out. Age, whatever people say is the next step, or the next logical step, that doesn't have to be the step for your journey. And I think what I like to do is speak to some of the people that I think are successful, whether that's in their relationships, in their personal success, professional success, people that I admire. And usually that's people that are older than me, and I talk to them about their journey, and even that was what drew me to you. I viewed you as so successful, and I wanted to understand your journey and your process, and hearing that all of those people, without a doubt, have had moments where they feel uncertain, or they have had setbacks, or they've been told that they're not the right fit for certain things. And to see that all of those contributed to a larger picture and a larger story and a larger success story gives me a lot of assurance that even if I'm 22, I can't see what the broader picture is, but um, if I'm working on myself and doing the things that I'm supposed to do, you can put some trust into the universe that things will hopefully work out.
Kaya, that is so beautiful. And thank you for sharing. I think you have a wealth of wisdom. Even at your young age, you have a wealth of wisdom. And thank you so much for sharing that with us and with those who are listening to us, viewing us, whatever the scenario might be, because I think that sometimes hearing the goodness and the journey that people have taken, it helps us to understand that, I go back to this too shall pass, and this is my journey, and these are things that I am here set to conquer. Any closing words other than I'm forever grateful that our paths cross, and I'm forever grateful for Milou, who's sleeping on my lap, all chilled. It's why we meet people along our journeys and along our path. Any closing words? Any advice?
I think I would just reiterate the same thing. I think you never know why people come into your life, or why your paths cross. And I think that's the beauty of life. And when I met you, I wasn't even looking for a job, in all transparency. I just wanted to connect. And if you would have told me then that I would have had such an impactful and honestly pivotal experience that I think is going to shift me into my professional life, I would have had no idea. So I'm so grateful to have met you. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to have this conversation with you. And I'm so excited to see where both of our journeys are going to go and how they'll continue to cross.
I love that, Kaya. Thank you so much. I know you're in DC. Let's see how long DC lasts. The invitation is open to come join me in Mexico City as long as I'm here. When I get to Miami, you're welcome to join me in Miami, because you're just a jewel. You're such a beautiful soul. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
There's something important this conversation reminds us of. The younger generation doesn't need to be fixed. They need to be seen. What Kaya showed us, it's something you can actually practice starting today. Intention isn't hesitation. It's the ability to move on purpose, to ask one thoughtful question instead of trying to sound impressive, to follow up when you said you would, to do the small things with consistency, because that's what trust is built on. Confidence doesn't need volume. It can look like walking into a room prepared. It can sound like, I don't know yet, but I'm willing to learn. It can feel like listening fully before you speak, then saying less, but meaning it. And professionalism isn't a costume. It's not pretending you're older than you are. It's respecting time, respecting people, respecting the work. It's being someone others can rely on, even when no one is watching. If you're early in your career, let this be your permission and your challenge. Don't wait to be chosen to start acting like a professional. Don't chase attention. Build a reputation. Don't rush to look successful. Practice being steady, because the people who open doors aren't always looking for the loudest candidate. They're looking for someone who makes things easier, not heavier. And that kind of presence, it's magnetic. Until next time, this is Health and Wealth.